You know the exact feeling of sitting in another high-stakes meeting about the future? The crushing pressure to transform everything at once literally feels like a lead weight. You're just waiting for permission to start making massive changes, but the immense scale of the vision traps you firmly in place. You sit there quietly, wondering how you can possibly bridge that massive gap without tearing your entire foundation down first.
You see the massive gap so clearly in your mind. It sits right between where you are and where you absolutely need to be. Bridging that distance feels completely impossible in this current moment. You are told you must completely re-architect the entire system. That kind of absolute demand leaves you feeling completely stuck, isolated, and frankly, a bit paralyzed.
So, let's move on to the next part of this explainer, the dangerous idea.
Okay, let's dive into this idea and see exactly why it spreads like wildfire. It genuinely sounds like deep wisdom when it's spoken in a serious boardroom. It flatters everyone's sense that this new technology is just incredibly important. It immediately makes any cautious, incremental option look completely naive and small scale. You hear it repeated so often, it just becomes an unquestioned truth. But here's the catch. This sweeping advice completely ignores the complex psychological reality of how human organizations actually adapt to sudden change.
Changing an operating model always means changing your people. And people are simply the slowest, most complex part of any business there is. They are the absolute least predictable elements you will ever manage. You can re-architect a database in a single weekend. You cannot re-architect a human being on a Gantt chart. When you try forcing a total overhaul, you trigger quiet fears about job security, creating a massive, expensive bottleneck that stops value dead in its tracks.
That brings us to Section 2, the Value First Reframe. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the actual order of operations. Value should never, ever be gated by a massive process change. The process change must always follow the undeniable value you create. You just deliver a tool that actually works for your team. The operating model then naturally shifts because adapting is obviously worth the effort. You really don't need a finished, flawless platform to start making much better decisions today.
Let's move right into our next core section, the core principles of change. Principle 1 is the value first sequence. You must prioritize immediate utility over any theoretical redesign or massive organizational overhaul. Look closely at how a real, highly effective data platform was actually built. They simply shipped basic reporting for a handful of critical models. It was immediately useful to real people doing real, everyday work. Nobody had to reorganize their entire department before experiencing a psychological shift because the new efficient tool naturally created an addictive pull for change.
Principle 2 is the incremental litmus test. You must determine if your project breaks down into standalone, actionable steps. The truth is, most projects sold as needing total transformation completely fail this exact test. Their inherent value is actually quite easily separable if you look closely. Wholesale change is genuinely forced only when absolutely nothing pays off until the very end. That stressful, all-or-nothing scenario is far rarer than those catchy industry soundbites lead you to believe. Principle 3 is the human speed constraint. You must fully accept that your organization moves at the speed of trust and habit, not at the speed of your technology. Pushing your people way too fast results in quiet fears and deep anxiety. They will inevitably push back against your roadmap with broken routines and lost productivity. You must intentionally build trust through small wins so that the eventual shift in operations actually feels like a completely natural evolution.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real danger of moving way too fast. Consider a massive legacy cloud migration that was optimistically pitched for 3 months. 1. The internal team pushed back hard and literally cut the scope in half. Yet even the straightforward half severely overran that initial 3-month estimate. Maximal scope is always a highly dangerous, incredibly risky bet to place. If lifeless database tables are that incredibly difficult to move, just imagine the sheer friction of displacing an entire department of anxious professionals.
Principle 4 is the scope incentive guardrail. You must actively recognize the hidden incentives of those pushing massive redesigns. Their underlying structural motivations very often do not align with your actual needs. 1. You must firmly, relentlessly protect your roadmap from this dangerous pull toward complexity. Never let the seductive illusion of maximal scope quietly dictate your operational path.
A total redesign is obviously the largest possible engagement for an outside consultancy. They heavily benefit from the extreme complexity and the largest possible billing, but they rarely sit in the half-rebuilt ruins 18 months later when things get tough. 1. You are the one left waiting for a promised transformation that never actually arrives. The internal incentive must always remain anchored firmly on actual measurable value, because at the end of the day, you are the professional who has to live with the psychological and operational results when the dust finally settles.
Finally, let's explore the incremental action plan. So the crucial point is choosing exactly how you act today.
You must stop waiting for perfect organizational structures to just magically appear. You have to start finding the absolute smallest possible version of your vision. Find a standalone piece that can deliver real value right now. Strip away all the dependencies and the requirements for a total reorg. Keep stripping it down until you are left with something genuinely tiny. It must be small enough to actually happen this very week. You are building an engine of constant, highly dependable incremental value. Ship it immediately, step back, and simply let the business adapt around the undeniable proof of your concept.
The most profound changes in your business will not come from a massive reorganization, but from the small things that earn their place every single day. So I'll leave you with this. Will you place a blind bet on total transformation, or will you choose to ship something real today?